Hello, everyone. Ash and I thought we'd drop in real quick and discuss the relegation news that broke in The Guardian on Sunday. I think Matthew Hughes and Susie Rack reported that the WPLL, among other things, are proposing to scrap relegation from the WSL. So the details of it is that 23 clubs from the WSL as well as the Women's Championship met on Friday, the 28th of February, for a quarterly meeting. And one of the proposals that was brought up in this meeting was to scrap the relegation in the WSL from the 26-27 season onwards. So no club would be relegated, but promotion would still happen. So every year, one club would get promoted. The plan is to gradually expand the WSL to 16 teams, WSL as well as the championship, actually, to 16 teams until the year 2030, after which they would go back and re examine and see where you know uh, the league is at and whether they want to continue with not having relegation or would go back to the old ways, so to speak, and bring back relegation and see if it needs to be reintroduced. Ash, I think this is a news that kind of sent, like, at least for me, I was I was on Twitter and everybody went a bit nuts after seeing this. I thought I will start with you and ask you what your thoughts are on this, because I know you've been an English football fan for a very, very long time. You've been a Spurs fan for upwards of 20 years. Like, it is a football culture that you're very familiar with. So, what do you think about this proposition?
I mean, I think it's absolutely ridiculous, okay? Promotion and relegation are the keystones around which English football has always been shaped, at least in my opinion. And to me, scrapping relegation would only produce, especially for women's football, I think it's a bad idea because scrapping relegation would produce complacency from the management of several football club owners. Like, speaking as a Spurs fan, the women's team is already an afterthought. So if somebody told Daniel Levy that Spurs were no longer in danger of relegation, like they would literally not see a penny after that because the optics had changed, right? I mean, this is a man who has already lobbied to scrap promotion and relegation in women's football. So I think it's a terrible idea. It's terrible. Okay, I there are and I think let's break it into two parts, right? One is, do we want more teams in the WSL? Yes, we do. We need the league to be more competitive. A 12 team league doesn't really work for anybody. We need to increase the teams. Yes. On the other hand, does that mean that we need to stop relegation in order to do that? That is a different question. And I think there are other ways to go about this than just to, scrap relegation and be like, everybody's included, nobody's going to be cut out. So everyone can do nothing for the next 3, 4 years because you're all stay in the league.
Yeah, I think the key word that has been used is stability. Of course, the WPLL has not commented on this officially in, like, to any extent, but the key word seems to be stability. And for me, I think some of the managers were asked questions about this, right? So, for example, Gareth Taylor said that the players and the fans always want, like, promotion and relegation, and he doesn't see that going away. But I thought Rian Skinner's comments were more important, because she's obviously a manager, not this season, but last season, a manager who was fighting relegation and maybe even with Spurs to some extent, right? She knows how it works, and how, say, a football club responds, how a bottom of the table football club responds to a situation like this. So Skinner said, I thought it was interesting that she used the word incentive. She said that it offers an incentive to the clubs uh, to invest. That is keeping promotion relegation. But yeah, she also said that the clubs need to consider the pros and cons. Um, and I think her the key thing that she also said was that there needs to be, like a mandatory and sustained investment across the league from different clubs. But like I said, Ash, earlier, the key word is stability. Now, I was just curious, like, what do you like? For me, I feel like this. It's going to be. It's like a tightrope walk, right, between stability and complacency. Like, I feel like if we give an opportunity to say like a Daniel Levy, or we already have critiqued Liverpool for not investing in their women's team. You look at yeah, you look at Manchester United, you look at Ineos and Jim Ratcliffe, and we see how it's fallen off a cliff there. So, like, how do you think the clubs will respond? Do you think it's possible to move forward in good faith with something like this?
you know the thing is that they already have a track record. Like, good faith can only happen when the track record of not being in good faith doesn't exist. Uh like, to me, then the entire league will become about who can win the WSL, right? So the clubs that can win potentially the WSL, so the cities and the Arsenals and the Chelseas of the world, will invest in their women's team, because they'll be like, oh, we can win something, and everybody else will just be there to be picked off, you know and there'll no longer be like exciting games between Chelsea and Everton, or or whatever. Like now, or like even Chelsea and Leicester, where Leicester make Chelsea drop points. Like now, it'll just be the top teams will be playing each other, and everyone else will be there to be picked off, and like, it's there are already people critical of the WSL as a farmers league. Already it's happening, right? That trend already exists, and you don't want to do anything to make that worse. And I feel like this is something that will make it worse. And it's also about like fan entertainment. What is the incentive for a fan to watch Leicester versus Everton? Neither team is going to win anything. Like, or even, even like Palace was like the bottom two teams playing each other, or the bottom three or four teams playing each other. Those have always been considered six pointers. The hype around them is just as much almost as the hype around Chelsea and City playing each other, or something like that. So like, I think that uh, viewership will also drop, so financially it makes bad like sense, because that will mean that the viewership will only be there for these top games, and everything else will just like fall by the wayside. Because like, how many potential Leicester City fans are there who will watch that game? They
Yeah,
won't, right? And so your viewership comes from the fact that everyone's kind of watching all the games to keep up with where the league will be.
yeah.
So I just feel like this is not a good idea.
Yeah, I kind of agree because I feel like this season, especially, we know that bottom of the table has been more interesting than the top half of the table,
Yeah.
because like there's 4 points separating Villa and Palace right now, and there's 5 points separating Chelsea and Manchester United, which was seven like until this weekend. So, uh, like we know there's a lot of competitiveness and also a recognition that there are going to be consequences to finishing last, right?
Yeah.
And I think for me, I was having a chat with my sister, and we were discussing how, say, a team like Everton invested in bringing in a player like Kelly Gargo in the winter, for example,
Yeah.
or last season, West Ham were in a relegation battle with Bristol City and brought in Katrina Gorey and Christy Mewis. So those kinds of decision, the incentive and the drive for some of these clubs is also it also comes from the possibility of getting relegated. So yeah, I think
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, that is the drive. And like, coming back to what I said about more teams in the WSL, like, I feel like there are other ways to manage this. Like, continue with having one team relegated, but bring two teams above. Like you can have the top two championship teams coming in instead of one, and eventually you'll reach the 16 number that they want to reach. And otherwise, you could figure it out in any way. Like if you wanted to have that upheaval, instead of having 4 years of upheaval from the 26-27 season to the 2030 season, which would have, like 4 years of consequences for investment in the WSL, and possibly change, viewership, change interest, change any like momentum the WSL had. To having 1 year of upheaval where you just include 16, like you expand the league to 16 teams, and then you continue from there, and then
Yeah.
have relegation and promotion like always. So like these are two things from the top of my mind that I can already think up that are better ideas than having no relegation whatsoever. There have to
Yeah.
be some consequences to not doing well. That American style, it doesn't work for English football. It has never worked for English football.
Yeah, I agree. I think there is this false, because again, another word that's been thrown around a lot is competitiveness. And I honestly find it a bit ridiculous that like competitiveness is kind of attributed, or the lack of it is attributed to the fact that Chelsea have finished fifth. Sorry, Chelsea have finished top of the league 5 times in a row, right? But
I was
the
like, what?
reality, yeah, sorry, sorry. But the reality is also that, like, I don't think any team is like finished second to Chelsea in years back to back. So there is like competitiveness in the league, but the point is that the issue is not that Chelsea are throwing $1 million at Gurma. The issue is that the other clubs are also not doing the same. They're not investing, because now Chelsea has set the standard. Now the market is going to only go upwards. Top players, like any club making a statement signing, will probably aim for, like, I mean, players are going, like, clubs are going to demand upwards of 1 million. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think coming back to what you were saying about the NWSL, I feel like the NWSL is thought of as a very competitive league, and it is. And they have the NWSL Shield. They also have the playoffs. But the reality is that the clubs are like massively different. Like in English football, like some of these clubs are like crazy institutions that have been here, that have been around for centuries, like a century. You know what I'm saying? So whereas like in the NWSL, like they have salary caps. The football culture is different. They have salary caps for players. I think right now it's at 3.2 million or something along those lines for a club. They also have a drafting system which is different, because they do have a very thriving college scene as well.
Yeah, I
So
was going to say that as well. Like the fact that, like it's tied to their college scholarships. They have other incentives,
yeah,
like the drafting system, and like the ties that the players have to the collegiate footballing system. All of these things make it a very different beast. Like
yeah,
the WSL doesn't exist within that system. So
yeah.
it's the own thing. And so if it did not have this relegation and promotion as a system, then the whole thing sort of collapses on itself.
Yeah. So, like for a club, for example, a club, uh, if Chelsea were a club in the NWSL, Chelsea probably cannot afford to have, like, say, a player like Millie Bright, Naomi Gurma, as well as Sam Kerr in the same club. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah,
That's
yeah.
because of the salary caps, because that's a way of spreading it even. And of course, it's not a completely closed league. They have teams coming in, like I know that BFC was one of the teams that was introduced last season in the NWSL. So yeah, I think the competitiveness there emerges from like completely different factors, and it's going to be very interesting to see if part of this proposal. I don't think like the WPLL can strong arm clubs into
Yeah.
investing. I don't think that's going to happen. That's too rosy a
Yeah.
picture.
I feel like I'm also scared of this proposal because I know that there are so many like managements out there who will be very happy to be like, oh, no allegation, no promotion, we'll stay here forever, no problem. We don't have to invest anymore. So I'm very scared that like the stakeholders that will matter at the end are only the club representatives, and like that, like if any people who are watching, like you, please put pressure in your clubs to say no to this,
Yeah.
because leaving it to the financial people, they will obviously say yes to this.
Yeah, I think the other thing that they mentioned is that other stakeholders will be consulted, which includes like fans, support groups, I and I guess players as well. And I keep wondering what it's like for a player who is, say, in a team like Leicester,
Yeah.
um, to be in the situation where there is no relegation and your management. I mean, to be fair to Leicester, I do feel like they do invest a little bit. They're not the worst of the lot, I'd say. But you're in one of those teams, and the like your club does not want to invest. Like, where does that leave you mentally? Like, do you still play for the badge? Like, do you still want to win for your club when the club is offering so little to you? Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean,
I
I
mean,
think,
just devil's advocate in that you would continue to like ply your trade in the WSL. So there could be more like job security, safety.
mm,
Because if your club gets relegated, they probably make cuts, or like either sell you off, or you'd be playing for a lower wage because you're no longer playing in the WSL. So relegation comes with its consequences in terms financial consequences for players. So I can see why some players might actually be for this.
yeah. And of course, like most like top players do have that relegation clause in their contracts, but
Yeah.
that's only a handful of players. But yeah, I think the last thing I kind of want to discuss is like the investment bit of it. Like, do you think like a part of this proposal is also going to be a demand for like a sustained investment, like say a percentage of revenue or something along those lines? Do you see something like that happening at all?
Yeah, I see that happening. Like I think in 2018 that kind of happened with United, right? Where the clubs were asked, like applied to join the WSL by proving their investment, right? So I can like a minimum investment criteria is something I can see as being part of the proposal. I don't particularly have a problem with that, in the sense that I do think that clubs should put their money where their mouth is. But I'm also worried, like, why is it that the WSL has so many London clubs, right? Because that's where the money is. So that's why the WSL, what we have, what, six London clubs in the WSL?
Yeah, yeah,
um, and that's because all the money is focused in London, and I feel like that would not be a good representation of English football. And I would like apart from the Manchester clubs, like all the money is focused in London. So like Manchester, Liverpool, that area.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
I feel like it should be spread about a little bit. Clubs like Newcastle, for example, coming from other places in England, should, like, they deserve to be represented. Their fans deserve to be at the drawing board, at the table, simply because uh, despite the fact that these clubs may not be putting a lot of money into it, the fans certainly are showing up for these teams. So I think that uh, minimum investment criteria can be one of the things, but it should not be the only, like, it shouldn't be like Captain Moneybags, we come in and buy this place.
Yeah, I'm honestly a little concerned about such a scenario because, like, in women's football, at least, like right now, like we know that Birmingham, I think they're top of championship now, and they're very keen to invest. Birmingham City were like in the WSL got relegated, so that's a story there. But now they're very keen to come back up. You also have like Newcastle that has suddenly injected a lot of money into the women's team. Then you have like an independent, like independent as in like a club that does not have any affiliations with a men's team, which is the London City Lionesses, which is now owned by Michelle Kang, who is somebody who's very keen to invest in women's sport. So my concern is that like money and investment would not be considered at par with performance, but might be prioritized over performance.
Yeah.
uh, and I don't know how to make sense of something like that because Michelle Kang, I have my opinions about her, and her way of investing in women's sport. I think there is a lot to be critiqued there as well. But yeah, whereas I read this really interesting article in the BBC a few days ago about how Durham women's football club had lottery winners invest 115 million pounds in the hope of getting them into the WSL. The whole story was like really amazing. And obviously, Durham, they do not have backing of a Premier League team or like a men's team. So I think a lot of things do need to be considered. Ash, before we wrap up, any last thoughts?
Yeah, I do have one last thought, which is that, we have the opportunity with women's football to do things right, to imagine football uh, in a way where we're almost starting from scratch. Like, even though women's football has existed for so long, in certain sense, the league itself is still at a nascent level where, we can reimagine a sporting future that looks different from men's football, but yet takes all the best things that it can from men's football. And so, like, we cannot let, proposals that put money over the sport. Like, this is the time to control those proposals, simply because you want to focus on the sport as the center of everything in this reimagination. And this is an absolutely amazing opportunity that fans have to put that pressure, because there aren't as many fans for women's football. So every fan counts for a lot more. And
Yeah.
so I do feel like everyone needs to sort of make it clear to their clubs where they stand on these proposals.
Yeah, absolutely. I think honestly, they've mentioned that they're going to consult all stakeholders, and I do hope that's a real thing, that's a proper consultation and not just one of those like when we know stakeholder consultations when it's like a
Yeah.
hogwash. So let's hope that that's a real thing, and let's hope that all the fans and the supporters groups and in whatever way, if you can make your voice heard, that would be really really amazing. But you know what? We will keep an eye on the story that's developing, and we will keep you posted whenever there's news on this. Before we sign off, just a reminder to all of you to subscribe, like our videos, and do share it with some of your friends because I do think relegation is. I think this is something that needs to be discussed a lot more, and everybody, I think, needs to like kind of have like a kind of a united or like yeah, a united opinion or whatever it is on it. Like make your voice heard.